Hello, Bond fans, and welcome once again. So some of the questions that I get asked most frequently on my various social media pages are who I would pick to be the next James Bond. Now, I don't really do that speculation thing all that much. I like to deal in certainties, and I like to deal with, it's not up to me or the public who becomes the next James Bond. It's down to Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. It's not a democracy, as they've said. And I kind of like that. I think that's good, because it keeps it fresh and surprising. I'm happy that they wouldn't feel the need to succumb to what the public felt. Because often when the public, or the press, I should say, rather, speculate and talk about who the next James Bond could be, they only ever think about it in that moment. Like, if the film came out today, that person could be James Bond. They don't think, well, yeah, actually, if they're cast as James Bond today, well, then we'd have to wait 2-3 years for the film to come out, and then, would they be doing 4 films, 5 films, and then would they be old enough? Nonetheless, I thought it'd be very interesting to run through the most prolific and the most talked about actors who have been associated with the role in the time of relative uncertainty. I mean, personally, I'm pretty convinced that Craig will come back to do one more film, but the media does not seem to believe that, which is why there's been so much hype about who the next James Bond could be in the papers and in the media. So let's jump right in by talking about one of the more controversial choices, Idris Elba.
Okay, at the end I will come to a conclusion of my preferred actor for the role, but to start with, yes, it feels like rumours of Idris Elba being in talks with Bond have been going around for an infinity. Now, personally, I adore Elba. He's always a cool and welcome presence in a movie. I think he has an awesome, powerful voice, and I'm happy whenever he pops up in something animated. But saying that, he's never going to be Bond, because he's too old for the part now. This is exactly what I mean by people who want him specifically as Bond can only imagine him doing it now. Like, they don't really think that, Bond isn't just a one-film gig, and it doesn't happen instantaneously. It takes years. It's going to be a part of an actor's life for around a decade, and ideally, I think a Bond should start in his mid-30s. Idris, great actor, and maybe 10 years ago, he'd have been perfect, but not for right now. Henry Cavill is often touted as a potential Craig successor, and indeed, the actor was Martin Campbell's first choice for the role back in 2006 for Casino Royale, but Barbara Broccoli pushed Craig through, feeling that Cavill was just a bit too young, and well, the rest is history. But now that Cavill is old enough, could he do the role? Well, probably. His part in the Guy Ritchie Man from U.N.C.L.E. was impressive and Bond-like, but he's already Superman, and I just can't imagine the guy who plays Bond being 2 tentpole big budget movie heroes. I mean, Craig himself turned down the role of Thor in the Marvel films because Craig felt his ego couldn't handle being both a superhero and James Bond, and I think that rule should apply to Cavill too. On a similar note, Tom Hardy potentially has the Mad Max series on his hands, but I think I could actually go more with him as Bond than the previous 2 I mentioned. His role in Inception probably going some way to influence my opinion on this, but at the time of recording, he's 38, and well, they need to get a move on if they, were intending on using him for the part. Also in close association with a superhero franchise is Tom Hiddleston.
I think he's great in those Marvel films, playing a sort of smarmy, villainy type, but I don't know, there's just something about him that is that... I can't imagine him as Bond so much as I can imagine him more as sort of playing Ian Fleming in, like, a biopic, or a Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy kind of espionage film, but Bond... I just don't see it.
Aidan Turner falls into a similar category for me. Great actor again, perfect age for the part too, but there's just something about his presence, or maybe I just only see him in period stuff like And Then There Were None and Poldark, so I have trouble thinking of him in a contemporary role, but I can only really see him playing Ian Fleming, or even maybe, Sean Connery in a biopic about James Bond, rather than James Bond himself. Now, to move on to actors who I could possibly actually see in the role, well, there's Luke Evans, who has had several high-profile Hollywood roles in the last few years, but I think he has just the right look and presence to be a Bond. I've loved him in everything I've seen him in, and, why not have another Welshman as Bond? Michael Fassbender is probably another one of the sort of, if we could have him in a Bond movie right now, right this second, he'd be perfect, and, he probably would be for me, but he's already 39, which I think ages him out of the job a bit, and then there's Gillian Anderson, of course.
Now, let me just start off by saying that I'm pretty sure that she was just sort of having a laugh. Gillian Anderson, when she posted on her Twitter the poster of her in front of the gun barrel. But, you know, I love and adore Gillian Anderson, and the idea of her playing a spy in an espionage adventure really appeals to me. I love that woman so much.
But if people really want to see her as a spy, then I think it would only be right and proper to create a new secret agent for her. I don't think that necessarily tinkering with an established character like James Bond, just so that we could tick some diversity boxes, is really a terribly progressive stance. But I'm not getting into the hotbed of controversy in this video. Just to run through some other names quite quickly. Dan Stevens, I can't see in the role, but then again, maybe that's just because I only associate him with, you know, wet lettuce period drama parts like Downton Abbey. Jamie Dornan, who I don't think is tough enough looking to be Bond. Jason Statham, probably too tough and geezery to be Bond. Matthew Good, too refined. Damian Lewis, too old. Jack Houston could be an interesting choice, but I don't know, I just don't know if he has the right look for the role. And again, this is entirely subjective. Like, whenever we talk about potential Bond actors, it can only ever be subjective, right? But when it comes down to it, if push comes to shove and I have to put a pin in a headshot on a wall and say, that's who I want as Bond, well, I can't do that, because it comes down to two guys for me. But before I say who they are, I should point out that both of these choices are with an eye to them debuting in their first Bond movie in 6 years or so from now. I suspect that Daniel Craig will do one more movie, and then when the search begins again, I would have thought that these two actors would be the perfect age and maturity to take on the part. So with that in mind, Richard Madden and James Norton, both British actors, both 30 years old, and haven't really become too associated with any other kind of movie franchise, which I think helps. When Daniel Craig was cast as Bond, he wasn't exactly an A-list movie star, talented and respected, sure, but which is what I feel like both the qualities that I feel both of these guys have. Madden is, of course, known for Game of Thrones, a show that I love, and he was terrific in, but I don't think that that association would stop people believing him as Bond. Maybe it's just because he has the look of a young Pierce Brosnan about him that I could really go with this guy, but I could genuinely really see him in the part. James Norton is someone I only really know from, like, TV stuff too. He's a great part in BBC's Happy Valley, and he has a kind of intensity that I think he could bring to the role in a sort of a Craig-like way. He's an actor who seems to have surged in media opinion recently, becoming the bookies' favourite to take on the part. I like to think my own Facebook post citing my support for him as Bond had some effect on this, but that's not entirely likely at all. But, you know, when it comes down to it, those two are easily my favourites to become Bond when Craig steps down.
So that's my 2 cents on who could be the next James Bond. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I mean, this is one of the more discussion-heavy topics that, you know, a lot of feedback is, you know, required to get a sense of what the general fandom thinks. So please do leave your comments below this video, or on Facebook, or on Twitter, and hopefully we'll get a good conversation going on some of those platforms. Until next time, Bond fans, so long for now.